Origin of the gladiators, from slavery to the arena. Imagine a world where the fight for survival was not just a matter of life and death, but also a grand spectacle that moved crowds. Thus was born the fascinating and brutal universe of gladiators. This story begins with prisoners of war and slaves, men and, in some cases, women, torn from their lands, cultures, and families, to serve as fundamental cogs in a mechanism that united power, entertainment, and social control in the vast Roman Empire. Arrival of prisoners of war. In Rome's territorial expansions, armies conquered cities, kingdoms, and entire peoples. Those who were not killed in battle were captured and became the property of the Roman state or the victorious generals. These prisoners were of different origins: Gallic, Thracian, Numidian, Germanic, and brought with them skills, cultures, and even combat techniques that, over time, would become trademarks of their performances in the arena. But not all gladiators were foreigners. The Roman system also allowed condemned slaves and criminals from Rome to be sent to the gladiator games, the gladiator training schools. These men, generally marginalized and without rights, were prepared for an uncertain destiny, where their lives depended on pleasing the public. The training schools, entertainment factories. Once captured or convicted, future gladiators were sent to these special schools. Different from a prison but equally rigid, the schools were run by trainers, and owners of gladiators who were often more interested in profit than in the lives of their fighters. There, they were taught how to handle weapons, such as swords, tridents, and nets, and learned techniques that would make each combat seem like a choreography of life and death. The training was exhaustive and meticulous. Each gladiator was instructed according to his origin or physical aptitude. The Thracians, for example, were trained to use small shields and scimitars. The Retiaries, with their nets and tridents, symbolized the fight against freshwater fishermen. Each type of gladiator had its specific function, ensuring diversity in the shows and keeping the public entertained. Games and the social context. Gladiatorial games were not just a pastime. They were a powerful instrument in the social and political context of Rome. Emperors and magistrates used these struggles to win the favor of the people. They built huge amphitheaters, like the famous Colosseum, to demonstrate the power and glory of Rome. There, under the scorching sun or under the shadow of the tents erected for the elite, citizens of all classes gathered to watch the spectacle. For the public, the games were about more than violence. They were a form of collective catharsis, a time to forget everyday problems and unite around the Roman spirit. For politicians, it was an opportunity to reassert their power, distribute free food, and keep the population under control, following the maxim of bread and circuses. The meaning of arenas. Arenas were places where fate was decided not only by physical strength, but also by the will of the public and, often, the emperor himself. A gladiator who fought with courage and skill could win the respect of the crowd and, with luck, even freedom. Those who lost, or worse, dishonored their origins as fighters, would face quick or slow death, depending on the mercy of the people. Thus, gladiators emerged as tragic and heroic figures, at once despised for their condition as slaves and idolized as stars of ancient Rome. Their battles shaped a significant part of Roman culture, leaving a legacy that echoes to this day, reminding us of the limit between cruelty and the fascination that human power is capable of generating. And so, from slavery to the arena, a spectacle was born that reflected the essence of Roman civilization. Glory, brutality, and the eternal quest for power. Training at gladiator schools. Now, imagine being taken to a place where every dawn is a test of survival. Gladiator schools, known as gladiator games, they were much more than training sites. There, the body, mind, and spirit of men and occasionally women were shaped with a single objective: to transform them into living spectacles, true fighting machines, capable of entertaining a demanding and fierce crowd. The beginning, from arrival to baptism of blood. Upon arriving at a gladiator school, a prisoner or slave was faced with a relentless reality. The environment was rigid, almost military, commanded by the trainers, experienced coaches who saw their charges more as investments than as human beings. Each new recruit was physically assessed for their height, strength, endurance, and even temperament. Those deemed strong enough were accepted, The weakest faced rejection or, even worse, death. Before entering the arena, the gladiator went through a rite of passage called proof. It was like a bloody baptism, where they proved their ability to fight in simulated combat using wooden weapons. This first test served to determine their potential and also to intimidate them, making it clear that failure was not an option. Training routine, forging perfection. The days began at sunrise, and there was no room for rest or weakness. Each gladiator underwent exhaustive training that combined physical strength, combat technique, and even psychological strategies. The trainer he taught not only how to fight, but how to view combat as a theatrical performance. The fight was as much survival as it was spectacle. Physical training included running, lifting weights, and exercising with heavy equipment. They used wooden swords, much heavier than real weapons, to strengthen their arms and develop stamina. Running in full armor was a common activity, preparing them for the long and exhausting battles in the arena. The art of fighting and staging. Each gladiator was trained in a specific fighting style, often based on their origin or natural abilities. A Thracian, for example, learned to wield a short scimitar and use a small shield with agility. A retreatist, inspired by fishermen, used a trident and net depending on speed and precision. And there were the Murmelos, armed with long swords and protected by large shields and helmets that made them imposing in the arena. But fighting well was not enough. Gladiators needed to impress the crowd. They learned how to move dramatically, exaggerating their moves and reactions, almost like actors on a stage. A defiant look, a triumphant pose after taking down an opponent. It was all part of the show. After all, the Roman public wanted spectacle, not just blood. The relentless discipline. Discipline in schools was severe. Those who disobeyed the orders of trainers or demonstrated a lack of commitment, they were severely punished. Physical punishment was common, but the threat of death loomed constantly. At the same time, there were rewards for those who excelled. A skilled gladiator could gain more food, better conditions, and even a chance to fight for his freedom. Despite the brutality, many gladiators developed a strange sense of camaraderie. Training together day after day, facing the same challenges and punishments, they formed bonds that sometimes helped them survive the harsh reality. A greater purpose: survive and captivate. The training in gladiator games, it wasn't just about teaching someone how to fight. It was about transforming an ordinary human being into something extraordinary, a symbol of Rome's strength and power. Every move, every strike, every fall had to be perfect. The gladiator was a mix of warrior and actor, a combat artist, ready to face death with courage, or at least appear so in front of the crowd. After months or even years of training, these men were ready for the arena. But even so, they knew that the real battle was just beginning. In the arena, they not only fought other gladiators, but also the judgment of the public, the cruelty of fate, and the constant shadow of death. And so, from the ashes of slavery and oppression, gladiators emerged, tragic and fascinating figures, destined to engrave their names in the history of Rome and, for some, in the hearts of the crowd. Spartacus, the slave who defied Rome. Imagine a man who started out as a slave, chained and humiliated, and ended up leading one of the greatest uprisings against the most powerful empire in the ancient world. This is the story of Spartacus, a gladiator whose courage and leadership challenged the established order in Rome and inspired thousands to fight for freedom, even if the price was their own lives. From warrior to slave, Spartacus was born in the region of Thrace, a territory north of Greece known for its fierce warriors. He was a trained soldier, skilled in the use of weapons and the art of war. But at one point in his life, luck turned against him. Captured during a confrontation or perhaps betrayed by allies, Spartacus was sold into slavery and sent into Rome's cruel gladiator training machine. Taken to one of the gladiator games, the gladiator schools, Spartacus was forced to fight. There, he faced exhausting training and the constant threat of death. But his indomitable soul never accepted the idea of it being just a spectacle to entertain the Romans. The uprising, when hope becomes rebellion. The turning point in Spartacus' story came around 73 BC. At a gladiator school in Capua, he and about 70 other men, tired of being treated as expendable pawns, planned an audacious escape. Using kitchen utensils as weapons, they took on the guards, escaped the school, and stole real weapons along the way. News of the escape spread quickly, and more slaves began to join the group. To Rome, they were just a disorganized bunch. But under the leadership of Spartacus, they became a formidable force. He was not only a military leader, but also a symbol of hope for those living in servitude. His charisma and strategic ability made him stand out, uniting men from different cultures, languages, and origins in a single purpose: freedom. The revolt gained strength. The initial small group soon grew into a veritable army. Spartacus led his men in a series of impressive victories against the Roman legions. He used the military knowledge gained from his life in Thrace to outmaneuver the Romans, exploiting terrain and surprise in each battle. Under his leadership, the slave army grew to more than 70,000 men, women, and children. They roamed the Italian regions, looting villages and freeing other slaves. But Spartacus was not just driven by revenge. He attempted to negotiate with Rome, offering a peaceful way out for himself and his followers. His goal was not to destroy Rome, but to escape to freedom outside the empire's borders. However, the Romans, proud and inflexible, refused any agreement. The final battle. As the revolt grew, the Roman Senate realized that Spartacus was no common enemy. They sent their best generals to face the rebel Gladiator. With each victory of the slaves, Rome responded with more force and violence. Spartacus knew that the final battle was inevitable. In 71 BC, after years of fighting, Spartacus and his army faced the forces of Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the richest and most powerful men in Rome. Despite their courage and brilliant tactics, Spartacus' army was outnumbered and logistically outnumbered. The battle was brutal, and the blood of thousands was spilled on the battlefield. Spartacus fought to the end, the stories say. His body was never found, but his spirit lived on as a symbol of resistance. Rome, in its fury, crucified more than 6,000 of its followers along the road between Capua and Rome, a cruel message of warning to anyone who dared challenge the empire. The legacy of Spartacus. Although his revolt was crushed, Spartacus left a deep mark on history. He proved that even the most oppressed could rise up against tyranny. Its story has been told and retold over the centuries, inspiring legends, books, and films. Spartacus was not just a gladiator or a leader. He was the embodiment of the human desire for freedom. And to this day, her courage reminds us that, even in the face of overwhelming forces, fighting for what is just is never in vain. Crixus, the companion of Spartacus. Imagine a warrior with an indomitable spirit, whose strength and courage echoed like thunder on the battlefields. This was Crixus, a Gallic gladiator who stood out not only for his physical strength, but also for his fierce determination to seek freedom. Although his story is often overshadowed by the figure of Spartacus, Crixus played a key role in the slave revolt against Rome, showing that courage often goes hand in hand with tragedy. The indomitable Gaul. Crixus was born in Gallic lands, a region known for its fearless warriors and rich culture. But the freedom he knew in his youth was brutally stripped away. Captured during the Roman campaigns in Gaul, he was reduced to the condition of a slave, sold and sent to a gladiator game in Capua. There, he became a gladiator, trained to entertain the Roman public with his combat skill. He was an imposing man of unparalleled strength, but he also carried within him a pride that not even chains could erase. Crixus wasn't just a fighter. He was a symbol of resistance, someone who saw every battle as a step towards revenge against those who had destroyed his freedom. The encounter with Spartacus. At the gladiator school, Crixus encountered Spartacus, a fellow misfortune who shared his thirst for freedom. Although their origins were different, they both had the same goal: to break the chains that bound them and challenge the oppressive power of Rome. Together, they led the daring escape from the gladiator school in Capua, an action that sparked the largest slave revolt in the history of the Roman Empire. Crixus became Spartacus' right-hand man, a leader as fierce as he was loyal. In the first battles against the Romans, his strength and skill in combat inspired the other slaves, who saw him as a true hero. He fought with the vigor of someone who carried with each blow the memory of a lost home and the hope of a free future. The separation, two paths, one goal. However, not all great leaders share the same vision. As the slave army grew, differences in strategy began to emerge between Spartacus and Crixus. Spartacus wanted to drive the slaves beyond the borders of the empire, seeking refuge far from Rome. Crixus, on the other hand, wished to face the Romans head-on, destroy their legions, and take Italy. This difference in thinking led to a separation. Crixus and a large group of followers, many of them also Gauls, decided to follow their own path. For them, the fight was not just about escape, but about revenge, about showing Rome that the oppressed could rise up and challenge absolute power. The final battle of Crixus. Crixus' decision was courageous, but also tragic. In 72 BC, he led his group against Roman forces in southern Italy. It was an unequal confrontation, with the Romans counting on a well-trained and equipped legion. Crixus, however, did not back down. He entered battle like the warrior he always was, fighting with the ferocity of a cornered lion. Unfortunately, fate did not favor Crixus. He was defeated and killed in combat. For Rome, his death was a strategic victory. For the slaves, it was a devastating loss. Spartacus, upon hearing the news, organized a grand funeral in his honor, sacrificing 300 Roman prisoners as a tribute to his fallen friend. The legacy of Crixus. Although his rebellion ended in defeat, Crixus' name lived on as a symbol of bravery and resistance. He showed that, even in the face of the most powerful forces, the fight for freedom is always worthy. His story is a reminder that the greatest heroes are not only those who triumph, but also those who refuse to give up, even when victory seems impossible. Crixus, the Gallic gladiator, left a legacy of courage and determination. He fought not only for himself, but for all the oppressed who dreamed of freedom. His life and death continue to inspire, reminding us that true strength lies in the souls of those who never abandon their ideals, even in the face of the greatest of empires. Commodus, the gladiator emperor. Imagine an emperor who could have ruled wisely, surrounded by the luxury and power of the throne of Rome. But instead, he chose to descend into the heart of the arena, a place of sweat, blood, and dust, to fight as a gladiator. This is the story of Commodus, a controversial and extravagant figure who defied the norms of imperial majesty and tarnished his legacy with decisions that veered between the absurd and the tragic. The heritage of an empire. Commodus was born in 161 AD, the son of the great emperor Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's most respected leaders, known for his wisdom and stoic philosophy. While Marcus Aurelius ruled with justice and balance, believing in the emperor's moral duty to his people, Commodus grew up surrounded by privilege, without sharing the same worldview. From a young age, he demonstrated an extravagant personality, inclined to vanity and pleasure. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, Commodus, then just 18 years old, assumed the throne of the most powerful empire in the world. The Romans expected him to follow in his father's footsteps, but Commodus had other plans. The fascination with the arena. While other emperors sought to strengthen the empire through conquest and reform, Commodus was obsessed with himself and the image he projected to the people. He saw the arena, the gladiatorial stage, as an opportunity to get closer to the masses and feed his ego. For him, being worshipped as a popular hero was more important than the dignity that the throne demanded. Commodus began to attend the gladiatorial games, but not as a mere spectator. He wanted to be a protagonist. Wearing luxurious armor and choosing finely decorated weapons, he entered the arena to fight, presenting himself as a gladiator. He claimed to be the reincarnation of Hercules, the demigod of Roman mythology, and often appeared wearing a lion's skin and carrying a large staff, as if he were the legendary hero himself. The rehearsed show. Despite his displays of bravery, Commodus' fights were carefully orchestrated. He did not face experienced gladiators in real combat. Instead, their opponents were often slaves, criminals, or gladiators instructed to lose. Thus, he ensured that his victories were grand and that the public saw him as invincible. Still, his presence in the arena fascinated the people. Commodus knew how to create a spectacle. He didn't just fight for fun. He turned each fight into a theatrical performance, projecting his image as the greatest gladiator of all time. It was a mix of vanity and manipulation, a show designed to bolster his popularity among the crowds, even as it infuriated senators and aristocrats. The decline of the empire. While Commodus dedicated himself to the arena, the empire faced a crisis. Rome's administration was neglected, public coffers emptied to finance its luxuries and games, and corruption spread among government officials. Not only did he ignore the duties of an emperor, but he also cultivated an extravagant lifestyle that alienated political and military leaders. His erratic behavior and irresponsible decisions began to generate enemies. He went so far as to rename Rome the colony of Commodus and rename months of the calendar with his own titles. His actions were not just eccentric. They represented a direct affront to Roman traditions and dignity. The fall of the gladiator emperor. The mixture of paranoia, megalomania, and contempt for politics ended up isolating Commodus. He began to see conspiracies on all sides, ordering allies and enemies to be executed in equal measure. His rule became unsustainable, and the tension culminated in 192 AD, when a group of conspirators, including his mistress and his butler, plotted his assassination. On the night of December 31st, 192 AD, Commodus was strangled by a fighter named Narcissus, hired to carry out the act. Thus ended the life of the emperor who exchanged the throne for the spectacle of the arena, leaving behind a legacy marked by decadence and scandal. The legacy of Commodus. Commodus is remembered as one of Rome's worst emperors, but his story continues to fascinate for its uniqueness. He was a man who refused to accept the expectations placed upon him, seeking fame in a way no other emperor dared. His life is a reminder of how power, when placed in the wrong hands, can bring an empire to the brink of collapse. The gladiator emperor lives in the memory of history as a tragic and intriguing figure, a symbol of how the unbridled pursuit of personal glory can destroy even the most powerful of thrones. Flamma, the gladiator who refused freedom. Imagine a man who won the right to freedom, not once, but 4 times, and yet chose to remain in the heart of the arena, where each fight could be his last. That man was Flamma, a Syrian gladiator whose courage and determination transcended the quest for common freedom. His story is as fascinating as it is intriguing, a true enigma of bravery, honor, and passion for the arena. From Sirius to gladiator. Flamma was born in Syria, a region rich in culture and tradition, but also marked by constant Roman invasions. He was captured and sold into slavery, torn from his homeland to be trained as a gladiator in Rome. He was young, around 20 years old, when he arrived at gladiator games, the gladiator training schools. There, his strength, agility, and determination soon caught the attention of trainers, who recognized his potential to become a legend. The life of a gladiator was not for the weak. The training was brutal, the fights were deadly, and the future was uncertain. But Flamma seemed to have been born for the arena. He possessed a combative spirit and skill that made him stand out among his companions, quickly transforming him into one of the most feared and admired gladiators of his time. A warrior without equal. Throughout his career, Flamma participated in 34 official combats, an impressive number considering that few gladiators survived so many fights. His specialty was fighting as follower, a type of gladiator equipped with a sword, shield, and heavy helmet, designed for intense duels against agile opponents such as Retiarians armed with nets and tridents. What made Flamma special was not just her physical strength, but her ability to turn each fight into a spectacle. He knew how to captivate the crowd, playing the role of a hero or a villain, depending on what the audience wanted. Each fight was a deadly dance, where he combined strategy, technique, and a touch of theatricality that made the arena vibrate with enthusiasm. The honor of Raw. In ancient Rome, a gladiator who demonstrated exceptional bravery could be awarded the Raw, a wooden sword that symbolized freedom. Receive the Raw, it was every gladiator's dream, as it meant the end of his servitude and the possibility of starting a new life as a free man. Flamma, with her incredible career, received this award not just once, but 4 times. The crowd and sponsors of his games revered him, recognizing his greatness. But surprisingly, Flamma refused freedom on every occasion. He chose to remain in the arena, fighting, even when he had the opportunity to abandon the violence and death that surrounded his daily life. Why refuse freedom? Flamma's decision continues to intrigue historians and admirers. Why would anyone refuse freedom, especially in a world where a gladiator's life was so precarious? Perhaps the answer lies in the essence of who he was. For Flamma, the arena was more than a place to fight. It was a stage where he found purpose, honor, and even glory. He was a man who lived for combat. Each fight was a testament to his strength, each victory a reaffirmation of his skill and courage. He wasn't just a gladiator, he was the gladiator. The arena was the only place where he could truly be himself, where crowds cheered him on and his existence made sense. The end of a legend. At age 30, an advanced age for a gladiator, Flamma fell in combat, ending a career that had inspired and moved thousands. His tombstone, discovered centuries later, describes his trajectory. Flamma, Syrian, fought 34 times, won 21, drew 9 and lost 4. He lived as a gladiator and died a free man. These words capture the essence of his life, a life marked by choices that defied logic but revealed the soul of a true warrior. Flamma's legacy. Flamma is not only remembered for his victories or the number of fights he faced. He is remembered as a symbol of determination, of someone who found purpose in a place where others saw only suffering. His story reminds us that freedom is not the same for everyone. For some, it's escaping the chains, but for others, it's following the call of the heart, even if it means facing death head-on. The gladiator who refused freedom lives on as a legend, proof that, in any era, it is the choices we make and not the circumstances that surround us that define who we truly are. Priscus e Virus, Eluda dos Amigos. Imagine the heart of the Colosseum pulsing with the sound of thousands of voices, a mass of spectators filling every corner of Rome's most famous amphitheater. It was the year 80 AD, the inauguration of the Colosseum, a grand spectacle organized by Emperor Titus to celebrate the glory of Rome. Among the many fights that marked this celebration, one was recorded in history. The epic combat between Priscus and Virus, two legendary gladiators and, more than that, two friends. Two men, one destiny. Priscus and Virus were not common. Both had begun their journeys as slaves captured in distant lands. Priscus, strong and cunning, came from the northern provinces, while Virus, agile and strategic, had his roots in the east of the empire. Each one, when sold to the gladiator games, found in training and in the arena not only a way to survive, but to stand out. The two became skilled gladiators, gaining fame in combat and earning the respect of the Roman public. More than that, they became inseparable friends, sharing the same fate of slavery and the same desire for glory. But fate, in its cruel irony, brought them face to face on the biggest stage of all, the Colosseum, the grand opening. The opening of the Colosseum was not just a celebration. It was a political event, a demonstration of Rome's power and its ability to control life and death. Emperor Titus wanted to impress the people, and the combat between Priscus and Virus would be the height of the games. When the two gladiators entered the arena, the crowd greeted them with a roar that seemed to shake the very ground. On one side, Priscus with his brutal strength and his short sword. On the other, Virus, fast and precise, with a shield ready to parry any blow. Despite the friendship that united them, they both knew that, at that moment, they were adversaries. Honor demanded that they fight with everything they had. The epic combat. The clash was a dance of skill, strength, and strategy. Priscus advanced with powerful blows, trying to corner Virus, while he used his agility to dodge and counterattack. With each movement, the crowd cheered, shouting the name of one person and then another. The fight lasted like few before. Minute after minute, blow after blow, the two gladiators faced each other with an intensity that kept everyone in the Colosseum riveted to the spectacle. Their strength began to weaken, sweat dripping as each sought the last bit of energy to overcome the other. But neither backed down, neither was willing to give in. The surprising ending. Finally, after a fight that seemed endless, both gladiators fell to their knees, exhausted. Their weapons were almost useless in such tired hands. The crowd, instead of demanding a winner, began shouting for mercy. Never before had spectators witnessed such equality of strength, courage, and skill between two men. Emperor Titus, impressed by the fight and public outcry, did something unusual. He stood up from his seat and raised his hands, granting them both victory. It was an unprecedented gesture. Priscus and Verus, together, were declared winners. As a sign of respect and admiration, Titus ordered that each one receive a raw, the wooden sword that symbolized freedom. A legend of Priscus from Verus. This moment went down in history not only as a great event, but as a symbol of friendship and equality even in the cruelest times. Priscus and Verus, two gladiators who fought with everything they had, walked out of the arena as free men, united by the glory and courage they had shown. The inscription of this combat was recorded by the poet Martial, who captured the essence of the occasion. Together they fought, together they won, and so, Priscus and Verus' combat was not just a fight. It was a spectacle of bravery, respect, and brotherhood that resonates to this day as one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of the Colosseum. This is the story that teaches us that, even in the most difficult circumstances, friendship and respect can turn a battle into a legend. Carpophorus, the beast tamer. Imagine being in the center of a gigantic arena, surrounded by thousands of screaming, euphoric spectators. On the floor, a cloud of dust rises as a cage opens. From within, a gigantic lion emerges, its roar echoing like thunder. And before him stood just one man, armed with nothing but a spear and his courage. This was Carpophorus, the legendary gladiator known as the Beast Tamer, whose name was engraved in history for his epic fights against the most ferocious animals of the Roman Empire. The beginning of a legend. Carpophorus was born in the province of Mauritania in North Africa, a land famous for its abundance of wild animals. Some say he grew up surrounded by these creatures, learning to understand their movements and instincts from an early age. Captured and sold into slavery, he was taken to Rome, where his skill in handling wild animals quickly caught the attention of gladiator trainers. Unlike gladiators who faced other men, Carpophorus was trained to face men. Bestiaries, combats against wild beasts. This was not uncommon in ancient Rome, where blood and spectacle were used to entertain the masses and display the power of the empire. What made Carpophorus special was his almost supernatural ability to tame chaos. He didn't just survive these battles, he transformed them into art. The arena and the games. The Colosseum, the largest amphitheater ever built, was the stage where Carpophorus shined. At games held to celebrate military victories or special occasions, he was often the highlight. Crowds came not just to watch him fight, but to witness the way he seemed to almost connect with the beasts he faced. Carpophorus was not just a fighter, he was a strategist. Before attacking, he studied the animal's every movement, its posture, even the slightest signs of hesitation. It is said that he faced 5 beasts at the same time: lions, leopards, and a bear, and emerged victorious. He used his speed, his precision, and his deep knowledge of animal behavior to defeat them, always keeping the audience on the edge of their seats. The most famous fight. Among the many stories about Carpophorus, one stands out as the most impressive. It was a game day in honor of the emperor, and the Colosseum was packed. To impress the public, organizers released a lion, a tiger, and a bear simultaneously into the arena. Each animal represented a deadly challenge on its own, but together they were practically a death sentence. Carpophorus, however, remained calm. He knew that a rash attack could cost him his life. First, he focused on the tiger, whose agility made him the most dangerous of the 3. Using his spear, he managed to distract him enough to land a well-aimed blow. He then dodged the lion's attack, luring it into an improvised trap made from the remains of the arena. Finally, he faced the bear, using his strength and agility to defeat him in a hand-to-hand confrontation. When it was all over, the audience burst into applause. Carpophorus was not just a survivor. He was a hero, a man who seemed unbeatable, even in the face of the wildest forces of nature. The price of glory. But Carpophras's life was not all glory. Each fight left marks on his body and soul. He bore scars from claws and bites, silent witnesses to the battles he faced. Despite his fame, he remained a slave, living to entertain and dying at any moment. Some say he was never defeated, that his skills made him a living legend. Others believe that, after years of combat, he disappeared, perhaps freed by his fame, perhaps retired to live out his final days away from the violence of the arena. The legacy of Carpophras. Today, Carpophras is remembered as one of the greatest bestiaries that Rome has ever seen. Her story is not just about strength or courage, but also about resilience and intelligence. He was facing not only the beasts, but also the system that put him in that position. His skill and his almost mystical connection with animals transformed his fights into unique spectacles, making him a legend that echoes through the centuries. His life reminds us that even in the most adverse situations, determination and talent can transform an ordinary man into an immortal icon. Carpophras, the beast tamer, stands as a symbol of human strength in the face of the impossible. Marcus Attilius, O voluntary gladiator. Imagine a man who could have chosen a quiet life as a Roman citizen, protected by the laws and privileges of his station, but who instead decided to enter the arena, a place where spilled blood was the price of glory. This is the story of Marcus Attilius, a free Roman who, against all expectations, became a gladiator by choice and challenged experienced champions, etching his name in the history of Rome. One chosen by the arena, not by destiny. In ancient Rome, most gladiators were slaves, prisoners of war, or convicted criminals. But Marcus Attilius was different. He was a free man, someone who did not need to fight for his survival, but chose the arena as a path to gain respect and glory. His reason for this decision is surrounded by mysteries. Some believe he was in debt and saw gladiatorial training as a chance to make money. Others say he sought fame and wanted to prove himself in a world ruled by force. Regardless of his reasons, his choice was extraordinary and provoked both fascination and disbelief. After all, why would a man with freedom, such a precious right, choose the risk of death in the arena? Training a volunteer. Marcus Attilius entered the house gladiator game, where he received the same treatment as the other gladiators. He received no privileges as a free citizen. On the contrary, his origin often provoked sarcastic comments among his companions, who believed that he would not last long. But Attilius was determined to prove himself as worthy as anyone else. His training was intense. He learned to use the glaive, the shield, and other weapons, facing simulated combats that prepared him for the challenges of the arena. The training was not only physical, but also psychological. He needed to learn to stay calm under pressure, to use strategy, and to turn fear into strength. Marcus Attilius embraced all of this with dedication, surprising even his coaches with his determination. The first fight, an unexpected beginning. Marcus Attilius' first fight was at the Colosseum, in front of a crowd eager for blood and spectacle. His opponent was Hilarus, a veteran gladiator and recognized champion, who had already won 12 victories. The public was skeptical. For many, the fight seemed decided before it even began. How could a beginner beat someone so experienced? But Attilius was no ordinary fighter. He entered the arena with courage and focus, determined to surprise everyone. The fight was intense, a true spectacle of skill and strategy. Hilarus attacked with strength and confidence, but Attilius, using his agility and intelligence, managed to avoid the blows and counterattack with precision. To everyone's surprise, Marcus Attilius defeated the veteran, earning his first victory and the respect of the crowd. The path to glory. This victory marked the beginning of an extraordinary career. Marcus Attilius continued to face increasingly difficult opponents, including famous and feared gladiators. He proved that his decision to become a gladiator was not a whim, but a sincere quest for glory and recognition. His success in the arena made him a figure admired by many. Not only did he gain the respect of the public, but he also defied stereotypes about who a gladiator could be. He showed that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle, even in a world as brutal as the Roman games. O ambassador of Marcus Attilius. Although Marcus Attilius' story is not as recorded as that of other gladiators, his impact was significant. He symbolized the idea that the arena was not just a place for those who had no choice, but also a stage where greatness could be achieved, even by those who entered voluntarily. Attilius leaves us with a powerful lesson. Sometimes the most difficult and dangerous path is also the one that offers the greatest rewards. He chose risk, faced fear, and proved that true freedom lies in living with courage and purpose, even when the world around you tells you you can't win. Thus, Marcus Attilius, the willing gladiator, became more than a man. He has become a legend who inspires us to face our own challenges, no matter how big or scary they may seem. The Colosseum, the stage of glory and blood. Imagine entering a place so grand that its walls seem to touch the sky, where the sound of thousands of voices echoes like thunder, and every corner tells stories of glory, courage, and tragedy. This place is the Colosseum, the largest amphitheater ever built, a true symbol of the power and spirit of Rome. More than just a building, the Colosseum was the beating heart of Roman public life, where crowds gathered to celebrate the greatness of the empire through unforgettable spectacles. The construction of an eternal monument. The Colosseum began to be built in 70 AD under Emperor Vespasian of the Flavian dynasty. It was designed to show the world the power of Rome and provide entertainment for the people. Its inauguration, in 80 AD, was marked by 100 days of spectacular games that included gladiatorial combats, hunts for exotic beasts, and even simulated naval battles. With a capacity for around 50,000 spectators, the Colosseum was a landmark of Roman engineering. Every detail was meticulously planned. The stands organized by social class, the corridors designed to facilitate the flow of crowds, and even the veil, an immense structure of sails that protected spectators from the sun. There was nothing like it in the ancient world, and its grandeur reflected Rome's boundless ambition. The show stage, the Colosseum, was the epicenter of gifts and hunting, the spectacles that defined Roman culture. In the morning, the arenas were filled with exotic beasts. Lions from Africa, tigers from Asia, elephants, hippos, and even rhinos. You hunters, experts in hunting these beasts, entered the arena to face the creatures, creating scenes of danger and excitement that kept the public in suspense. In the afternoon, the spectacle became even more intense. It was the turn of the gladiators, men trained to fight to the death or until the moment the crowd or the emperor decided their fate. Each fight was a mix of strategy, strength, and theatricality. The audience didn't just watch. He participated, cheering, applauding, or even calling for the death of a defeated person. But the Colosseum was not just a scene of blood and death. He also celebrated Rome's victories by reenacting historical battles or recreations of military conquests. On some occasions, the arena floor was flooded to simulate naval combat, an impressive spectacle that showcased the skill of Roman engineers. The social and political role. The Colosseum was not just an entertainment venue. He had a crucial role in Roman society. It was a political instrument used by emperors to win the loyalty of the people. Bread and circuses was the empire's maxim. As long as the people had food and entertainment, Rome's stability would be guaranteed. Entry to the games was free, allowing citizens from all walks of life to mingle and witness the power of the empire. Gladiators who fought in the arena often became popular heroes, figures revered by the public. And for rulers, the Colosseum was a way to display their generosity and reassert their authority. Emotions in the arena. Each event at the Colosseum was a spectacle of intense emotions. When a gladiator fell, the crowd anxiously awaited the verdict. The emperor, with a simple gesture of raising or lowering his thumb, determined whether the loser would live or die. The tension was palpable, and each decision became part of the drama that made the Colosseum an unforgettable place. The triumphant shouts of the victors, the roars of the beasts, the sound of metal clashing weapons, and the euphoria of the crowd created an atmosphere that no other place could match. It was a place where glory and tragedy met, where the limits of human courage were tested before thousands of spectators. The legacy of the Colosseum. Today, the Colosseum is more than a monument. He is a symbol of the complexity of Roman civilization. It reminds us of the ingenuity and power of the empire, but also of its brutality and the price paid by those who were forced to fight in the arena. Despite its decay over the centuries, its ruins still tell us stories of heroism and sacrifice. The Colosseum is a testament to how the Romans celebrated life, death, and glory. It remains one of the greatest symbols of what Rome was, a civilization of contrasts, where the great and the cruel coexisted, and where the human spirit, even in its darkest moments, found ways to shine. The gladiators and the public, the thumb that decided lives. Imagine being in the middle of a packed amphitheater, where every gaze is fixed on the arena. Every voice is part of a collective roar. In the dust on the ground, two gladiators fight with all their might, their weapons echoing through space as they seek a decisive blow. Suddenly, one of the combatants falls, injured and defenseless, and the crowd goes into ecstasy. This is the most anticipated moment, the moment in which the loser's fate is in the hands of the public and the emperor, summed up in a simple gesture, the movement of a thumb. The role of gladiators in Roman entertainment. Gladiators were not just fighters. They were the real stars of the show. Each one brought with it a history, a combat style, and often an origin that made it unique. Some were slaves or prisoners of war, forced to fight for their lives, while others were free men who sought fame and fortune in the arena. The public knew them, rooted for their favorites, and saw them as heroes or villains. The relationship between the gladiators and the public was intense. Spectators were moved by the fights, creating an almost personal connection with the combatants. The Roman public was demanding. He wanted more than brute strength and expected a show of skill, courage, and even theatricality. Gladiators who displayed bravery even in the face of defeat gained the respect and admiration of the masses. The decisive moment, the thumb that decided lives. When a gladiator fell, too injured to continue, he had one last chance to survive. With a symbolic gesture, he raised his hand and asked for mercy. At this moment, the entire arena turned towards the audience and, ultimately, towards the emperor or magistrate present. The decision to spare or take the loser's life depended on a simple movement of the thumb. The thumb gesture is one of the most iconic aspects of Roman games, but also one of the most debated. Despite the popular myth that thumbs up meant life and thumbs down meant death, many historians believe the reality was more complex. It is possible that the thumbs down indicated the end of the fight and mercy, while the thumbs straight or up suggested the final blow. The important thing was that the gesture was clear and unanimous, reflecting the public's desire. The public as judge and executioner. The Roman public played a central role in this ritual. The crowd could be compassionate, applauding and calling for the freedom of a gladiator who showed exceptional courage. But he could also be ruthless, demanding the death of those he deemed unworthy or who had not fought honorably. This power over life and death was one of the most fascinating and cruel elements of the games. It created a connection between the spectators and the gladiators, but it also reinforced the audience's position as an active part of the spectacle. The final decision, although technically up to the emperor or magistrate, often reflected the will of the crowd. To ignore the public outcry was to risk their wrath, something few Roman leaders were willing to do. The psychology behind the gesture. Why did a simple thumb movement carry so much meaning? In part, it was because it summed up all the tension of the fight in a single instant. But it was also a way of symbolizing the power of Rome, the idea that life and death could be decided as easily as someone decides the fate of a coin tossed in the air. For the gladiators, this moment was a final test. Many accepted their fate with dignity, aware that their attitude at the last moment could determine how they would be remembered. For the public, it was an unforgettable spectacle, a symbolic act that transformed the fight into something greater than simple violence, a ritual of power, glory, and sacrifice. Thumb's legacy. Although the gladiatorial games ended centuries ago, the thumb gesture remains a powerful cultural symbol. It encapsulates the duality of Roman spectacles, beauty and brutality, the celebration of life and the acceptance of death. The gladiators and the public lived an intense, almost symbiotic relationship, where each one needed the other for the show to happen. And, at the center of this relationship, was the thumb, the small gesture that decided the fate of men who fought for their glory, their freedom, or simply another day of life. This is the story of a people who turned power into spectacle and, in doing so, created a legacy that still intrigues and fascinates us. The luxury life of famous gladiators. Imagine a man who begins as a slave, fighting in the arena for survival, but ends his journey acclaimed by crowds, accumulating riches, luxurious gifts, and even the respect of Rome's elites. This was the reality for the most famous gladiators, who, despite the violence of their lives, could achieve a level of fame and prestige that rivaled that of the greatest generals and politicians of the Roman Empire. From slave to celebrity. In ancient Rome, most gladiators were slaves or prisoners of war, people who had no choice but to fight. But those who stood out in the arena had the chance to transform their destiny. A victorious gladiator, who demonstrated courage, skill, and charisma, could become a true celebrity. These gladiators received names that echoed through the streets of Rome. The public knew who they were, rooted for them, and even learned their fighting styles. The most popular were treated as heroes, admired for their victories and the way they faced death. In many cases, their struggles were celebrated as artistic spectacles, and their personalities were deified. The bounty of blood. Gladiators who accumulated victories not only achieved fame, but also riches. Games organizers and sponsors offered cash prizes and lavish gifts to combatants who delighted the public. Jewelry, expensive clothes, and even property were offered as rewards. Some gladiators, even though they were slaves, accumulated so much money that they could buy their own freedom, although many chose to continue fighting, seduced by glory. Roman elites also spared no effort to please their favorite gladiators. It was not uncommon for senators and even members of the imperial family to send generous gifts such as horses, personalized armor, or invitations to lavish banquets. Admirers among the elites. The charm of gladiators was not limited to the arena. Many of them, especially the younger and charismatic ones, gained admirers among the Roman elites. It was common for aristocratic women to fall in love with gladiators, sending them gifts and letters. The physical beauty and courage demonstrated in the arena made these men irresistible to many, even if they were of a lower class. Roman historians report cases of gladiators who had relationships with women of the nobility, generating scandals and gossip in society. For some of these women, the danger and aura of invincibility of gladiators were part of the allure. These relationships were complicated, but they also reinforced the fighter's celebrity status. Life outside the arena. The most successful gladiators lived in a fascinating contrast. While in the arena they faced brutality and the risk of death, outside of it they enjoyed a life of luxury and privilege. They attended banquets, were invited to exclusive parties, and could even walk the streets of Rome surrounded by cheering fans. Many famous gladiators were also free to train young patricians, children of Roman elites, who wished to learn combat techniques for sport or self-defense. This further elevated their status, transforming them into figures of respect in a society that valued strength and courage. The fragility of glory. Despite all the fame and wealth, the life of a gladiator has always been uncertain. Each fight could be the last, and even the most skilled were not immune to bad luck or an unexpected blow. Furthermore, popularity was fleeting. A gladiator who stopped fighting could quickly be forgotten, replaced by new heroes in the arena. But for many, the glory gained was worth the risk. The possibility of transcending his slave status and living like a legend was a reward few could refuse. These gladiators were not just fighters. They were artists, celebrities, and, above all, survivors. The legacy of famous gladiators. The most famous gladiators left deep marks on Roman culture. Their stories inspired poets. Their images were immortalized in mosaics and sculptures, and their lives were retold as examples of bravery and determination. Even centuries later, they continue to fascinate us, symbolizing the power of courage and the will to overcome circumstances. The luxurious lives of famous gladiators are a testament to how glory and sacrifice went hand in hand in ancient Rome. They walked the fine line between splendor and tragedy, showing that, even in the most difficult situations, it was possible to achieve the extraordinary. The cultural influence of gladiators on ancient Rome. Imagine living in a time where courage was exalted above all else, where heroes were not just told in poems, but seen in the flesh, fighting for survival in front of thousands of people. The gladiators of ancient Rome were much more than just fighters. They were living symbols of bravery and resistance, inspiring a culture that transcended the arenas and deeply marked the Roman imagination. Gladiators as icons of bravery. For the Romans, the gladiator was not just an armed man fighting for his life. He was an emblem of virtues that society valued: courage, determination, and loyalty. Even those who were slaves or prisoners of war, when they stepped into the arena, became figures of admiration, as they faced death with a strength that seemed almost superhuman. This bravery echoed far beyond the stands of the Colosseum. Gladiators were considered models of how to face adversity, a theme that resonated in a society accustomed to war and challenge. Roman poets and writers often used them as metaphors for perseverance, writing about their feats in verse that celebrated the strength of the human spirit. Gladiators in art and poetry. Gladiators left profound marks on the artistic expressions of their time. Sculptures and mosaics portrayed them in combat, with such realistic details that we can still imagine the intensity of their fights today. These works were displayed in the homes of wealthy citizens and in public spaces, as a way of honoring the heroes of the arena. Poetry also captured the spirit of gladiators. Writers like Martial and Juvenal included references to them in their works, celebrating their courage or criticizing the brutality of the system that placed them in such situations. These texts not only exalted the combatants, but also reflected on the moral complexity of the games, showing how gladiators were figures who inspired both fascination and compassion. The influence on theater and narrative. The impact of gladiators could also be felt in the Roman theater. Stories of epic combats and death-defying heroes influenced plays that were performed in theaters throughout Rome. These plays often combined elements of mythology and reality, transforming gladiators into semi-legendary characters who represented society's values and contradictions. Furthermore, narratives about gladiators were passed down from generation to generation, creating a type of folklore around these fighters. Even after their death, gladiators continued to live on in the stories told in taverns and markets, fueling the popular imagination. Gladiators as inspiration for the people. Although they were often slaves or prisoners, gladiators possessed a magnetism that attracted the Roman people. They symbolized the fight for freedom and the strength of character needed to face adversity. For the lower classes, who faced their own hardships, gladiators were a source of inspiration, showing that even the marginalized could achieve glory. This symbolism went beyond the popular classes. Many young aristocrats, fascinated by the gladiatorial lifestyle, hired trainers to learn combat techniques, or even tried to recreate their feats in private competitions. This fascination permeated all layers of society, reinforcing the central role of gladiators in Roman culture. The legacy that outlasts time. The cultural impact of gladiators did not end with the decline of the Roman Empire. The figure of the gladiator has continued to inspire generations, appearing in works of art, literature, and even modern popular culture. Films and books recreated their stories, perpetuating the image of these fighters as icons of courage and resilience. The gladiators left us a lesson that transcends time. Even in the most difficult circumstances, bravery can transform lives and leave profound marks on history. They were more than fighters. They were symbols of an era, inspiring art, poetry, and stories that continue to fascinate us. In ancient Rome, and even today, gladiators remain eternal examples of the strength of the human spirit. The decline of the gladiatorial games. Imagine an arena that once vibrated with the roar of thousands of spectators, now silent and taken over by time. The stands that were once filled with life have become ruins, and the gladiators, whose battles defined the heart of Rome, have become just a memory. This is the story of the end of the gladiatorial games, an era that reached its twilight due to cultural, religious, and political changes that transformed the Roman Empire forever. The apogee and the beginning of the decline. Gladiator games represented the pinnacle of entertainment in ancient Rome. For centuries, they have been used as a political, social, and cultural tool. Rulers won the favor of the people by organizing spectacular games, which served to reinforce imperial power and distract the masses from everyday difficulties. However, around the 3rd century AD, the winds began to change. The exorbitant cost of organizing the games became an increasing burden for the empire, which was already facing economic crises and barbarian invasions. Keeping the arenas active with exotic beasts and well-trained gladiators required resources that were beginning to be scarce. Little by little, the shows lost their former shine. The impact of Christianity. The emergence of Christianity was one of the most significant factors in the decline of the gladiatorial games. This new religion, which was growing rapidly in the empire, preached values of compassion, mercy, and respect for life, which directly contrasted with the brutality of combat in the arena. In the beginning, Christians were persecuted and, ironically, often used as part of the spectacle. They were thrown to the wild beasts to entertain the public, becoming martyrs whose courage strengthened the Christian faith even further. But as Christianity spread and gained adherents even among the Roman elite, society's values began to change. When Emperor Constantine I embraced Christianity in the early 4th century, the empire's policies began to reflect the ideals of this new religion. In 313 AD, the Edict of Milan proclaimed tolerance of Christianity, marking the beginning of the end of the gladiatorial games. Fighting came to be seen as a barbaric practice and incompatible with the new moral values that were shaping the empire. The influence of Honorius and the final coup. The final blow to the gladiatorial games came in the reign of Emperor Honorius. In 404 AD, an event occurred that symbolized cultural change in Rome. During a fight in an arena, a monk named Telemachus entered the arena and tried to stop the fight, calling for peace. The angry crowd attacked Telemachus, who ended up dead. However, his courageous attitude shocked society and profoundly influenced the emperor. Soon after the incident, Honorius decreed a ban on fighting between gladiators, officially marking the end of this practice. This decree reflected the progress of Christianity as a dominant force in the empire and the departure from the values that supported the games. Political and social changes. In addition to Christianity, political and social changes also played a role in the decline of gaming. The empire faced external pressures, such as barbarian invasions, and internal pressures, such as corruption and political instability. The resources that were previously directed to spectacles were now necessary to defend the borders and maintain central power. Roman society was also changing. Younger generations, influenced by new values and increasing urbanization, began to see games as a remnant of a brutal and outdated past. Arenas that were once a symbol of pride became relics of an era that Rome was beginning to leave behind. The legacy of the gladiatorial games. Although they came to an end, the gladiatorial games left an indelible mark on history. They symbolized the grandeur and contradictions of ancient Rome, a civilization that celebrated both brutality and beauty, glory and tragedy. Its arenas still stand as silent witnesses to a time when men fought for glory and survival before thousands of watchful eyes. The end of the gladiatorial games was not just the end of a show. It was a reflection of a changing Rome, a society that abandoned ancient practices in favor of new values and ideals. And so, the dust has finally settled on the arenas, but the stories of the gladiators live on, reminding us of a fascinating and complex chapter of humanity. The legacy of gladiators in the modern world. Imagine men who lived more than 2,000 years ago, fighting for survival in arenas filled with dust and blood, and whose stories still echo in our culture today. Roman gladiators were not just figures of their time. They have transcended time, becoming universal symbols of courage, sacrifice, and the fight against adversity. And although the arenas have fallen silent, the spirit of the gladiators lives on, inspiring generations through films, books, games, and even our modern view of heroism. Gladiators in cinema, a legend retold. Perhaps the clearest example of the gladiators' legacy is in cinema. They became icons of the big screen, starring in stories that mix action, drama, and the human spirit in its rawest form. The film Gladiator, 2000, directed by Ridley Scott and starring Russell Crowe, is one of the greatest examples of this. The fictional story of Maximus Decimus Meridius has captured the hearts of millions around the world, bringing back the power and allure of the Roman arenas. With epic scenes, memorable phrases like, "Are you not entertained? Aren't you entertained?" and an exciting soundtrack, Gladiator not only rekindled interest in gladiators, but also reinforced their image as tragic heroes fighting for freedom and revenge. This success shows how gladiators continue to be relevant, representing universal values that still resonate with modern audiences. Gladiators in literature, stories of courage and tragedy. Long before they hit the screen, gladiators had inspired writers over the centuries. Poets and historians of ancient Rome, such as Juvenal and Martial, documented the bravery of these fighters, but their stories continue to be retold in modern books. Historical novels, such as Spartacus by Howard Fast, explore the struggle for freedom and the moral dilemmas faced by these men and women. These works not only entertain, but also offer a window into the lives and challenges of gladiators, helping to preserve their stories and the complexity of their lives. Gladiators in games and pop culture. Gladiators also found a new home in the gaming world. Video games like Rise, Son of Rome, and series like Assassin's Creed allow players to experience the thrill and danger of being a gladiator. With stunning graphics and immersive narratives, these games bring arenas to life, allowing a new generation to experience, even virtually, the glory and sacrifice of gladiators. Furthermore, modern sporting competitions, such as MMA, mixed martial arts, are often compared to gladiatorial combat, with fighters displaying courage, endurance, and the quest for victory in front of crowds. While not life-and-death battles, these sports capture the competitive spirit and passion that gladiators embodied. The symbolism of gladiators in contemporary culture. Gladiators became more than just historical figures. They are powerful symbols in modern culture. They represent the fight against adversity, perseverance in the face of seemingly impossible challenges, and sacrifice in the name of glory or an ideal. This symbolism is often used in motivational speeches, advertising campaigns, and even in fashion, where the gladiator style appears in clothes, sandals, and accessories. They also inspire reflections on morality, power, and freedom. Gladiator stories are often used as allegories to explore themes of oppression, resistance, and the human desire for self-determination. These questions continue to be relevant, showing how gladiator fights still resonate in our own daily battles. The fascination that never ends. What makes gladiators so fascinating, even so many centuries later? Maybe it's the contrast between his brutality and his humanity. They were ordinary men and women who, faced with extreme situations, became extraordinary. Their stories remind us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it, even when everything is against us. The lasting legacy. The gladiators of ancient Rome may have disappeared from the arenas, but their legacy lives on in our collective imagination. They continue to inspire, challenge, and captivate, reminding us that even in the most difficult circumstances, the human spirit is capable of incredible feats. So, every time we watch an epic film, read a historical novel, or play a game that relives its battles, we are celebrating a legacy that has spanned the centuries. Gladiators are not just figures from the past. They are eternal symbols of a struggle that we all, in some way, share.